September the 8th, 1987 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you back memories of Grand Prairie of the past and then let you know what these people are doing today. We're on history tape number 50 today, and we are so excited about having some long-time Grand Prairians to be with us today. Mr. and Mrs. Wayne Barris. Welcome, Barrises, to It Happened in Grand Prairie.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Now, Wayne and Vita Barris, y'all have been so important to Grand Prairie in the past and continue to be, and that's one of the reasons we just were very excited to learn that you would come and be with us today. So let's start with Vita first, and let her tell about her parents, their names, and start out on our genealogy about you. Would you do that for us, Vita?
Okay. You want to start with my mother?
Yes, your mother. Mm-hmm.
My mother's name was Lula Cornelius Doris, and my daddy was George M. Doris.
Okay.
And
where did they live, Vita?
they came to Grand Prairie from Iowa Park, Texas.
From Iowa Park, Texas, up near the Wichita Falls area.
Yeah, and that's where I was born, in Iowa Park.
And you were born in Iowa Park?
Iowa Park.
Wonderful.
And that's where I finished school. And
you had brothers and sisters there?
I have one brother and one sister.
And one sister. Wonderful. And they moved to Grand Prairie, Texas?
No. My brother has never lived in Grand Prairie, but my sister lived here for a little bit. And but my brother lives in San Angelo, and he is an ex-FBI agent.
All right.
He's been retired, I guess 10 or 12 years from the FBI. And my sister lives in Athens, well, it's close to Athens. It's really Arp, Texas.
Yes, that's a good place, Arp.
And, well, you bat your eyes, you'll miss it. It's so little, but that's where she lives. And she did live in California for about 13 years, but they left California and came out here.
When your parents came to Grand Prairie, Texas, what did your dad do for a living here?
He was a carpenter.
He was a carpenter.
He put down the floors in nearly every house in Fairview, you know, on Oak Street and Birch Street. He put down the floors, I guess, because, you know, when we came to Grand Prairie, there wasn't but 1,500 people, really. And all of this area, you know, that area built up, that was just a pasture out there. So when those houses started being built, my daddy put the flooring down and a lot of the carpenter work.
All right, what year did you move to Grand Prairie, Texas?
In 1936.
In 1936. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And before we get to the part in Grand Prairie, Texas, maybe where you met Mr. Barris.
Well, I met him in Canyon.
Canyon?
I was going to school at West Texas State Teachers College, and I met him in Canyon.
And you met him in Canyon.
And we were married. We went together 10 months, and then we were married.
Wonderful.
And then we lived there. We lived there while the Depression hit us while we were there.
All right.
And he lost his job, and consequently everything else went with his job. And then we had to live with my folks for about a year until.
And is that in Grand Prairie?
No, in Iowa Park.
In Iowa Park, okay.
And then he got a job with Texas Electric, which he worked with for 42 years, something like that.
Wonderful.
And we got two wonderful boys.
Give us their names.
Ralph Edwin.
All right, and where is Ralph Edwin now?
Ralph is in Tyler.
In Tyler, Texas.
In Tyler.
All right.
And Harold Wayne lives in Kansas City. And
now, do you have any grandchildren?
I have 4 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren.
All right, now tell us the grandchildren, which ones belong to Wayne and which one belong to the others.
Well, now Harold just has, he has 2 girls, Rhonda and Valerie.
All right.
And Valerie has 1 little boy, Jeff.
All right.
And, you know, Harold lost his first wife with polio, you remember that. And then his daughters are Valerie and Rhonda. Now, Rhonda is the daughter of the girl he's married to now. And then they have just this 1 child. And then Ralph, his little girl was named Becky, and she had polio too, if you remember. She's
Yes.
still in a brace. And she has 2 children. And Kenny is his son, Kenneth Wayne, we call him Kenny. And he lives in Arlington, and he has 4 girls.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so nearby too for you. Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, and let's see, that's all the grandchildren we have.
And that was a goodly bunch, wasn't it?
That was a goodly bunch.
All right, why don't we let you rest just a minute? We're going to get back to you in just a little bit and talk with you about your time in Grand Prairie, separate and apart from Wayne, who was so busy in the downtown areas and everything. All right, now we're going to start back almost from the beginning with you, Wayne.
Okay.
We want you to tell us your mother and father's name and where they lived.
Well, my mother and father originally come from Missouri.
All right.
My dad come from Stone County, Missouri, and mother came from Greene County, Missouri.
All right.
And they moved to New Mexico. That's where I was born, at Clovis, New Mexico.
Wonderful.
And they homesteaded, they come to 1898, they came to New Mexico. And then they went from there, they moved, stayed there for several years, and then they moved out to, later years, they moved to Texas. And Dad was a plaster contractor, did plastering, and my mother was just a housewife. She did, she had, I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
All right.
And
2 of those are still living?
2 of those are still living. I have 1 brother in Clovis, New Mexico, and a sister in Clovis.
Wonderful.
And they're both living.
Great.
And then we moved to, from Clovis, we came to Texas, and we lived in Canyon. And that's where I met my wife there going to college.
All right.
At West Texas State Teachers College. And I was working for the Power and Light Company then. I was a switchboard operator and engineer in the power plant. And during the Depression years, they closed the plant down. It went out of business and moved the plant, so we lost our job. Not only lost our job, but we lost everything else we had during the Depression. We
Exactly.
lost our home and everything we had, and we moved down to Highway Park with her folks. They run a dairy down there. And then I just worked little odd jobs here and there in different places until I was out of a job almost a year. And then I kept going down to Texas Electric Service Company in Wichita Falls. I was a lineman, and I knew the business real well, and I finally got a job working with them for 8 months. And they said, now then the 8 months is up, you're going to be out of a job because we're going to have to lay you off. This was a special job. We was transferring a power line from Highway Park to Wichita Falls, from one side of the road, the highway to the other, doing it while it was still hot. You know, the line was still hot. And I worked there for, it was just about a little over 8 months, maybe 8 months and a couple of weeks. And we was fixing to lay all of them off that afternoon. We was out on the Burke-Burnett Highway in Wichita Falls, between Wichita Falls and Burke-Burnett. And they're going to lay the whole crew off that afternoon. And one of the guys said, well, we're going to get the axe tonight. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going to get the axe. I'll be working for this company when you guys all somewhere else. And so I got to the place where I was really sincere about the thing, and I just asked the Lord, I said, I've got to have a job. If you just give me a job where I can take my family and be with my family, I said, that's all I asked for. Well, that afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a big car drove up out in the middle of the highway, stopped, and they talked to my foreman a while, and then the foreman hollered at me, and I was up on top of a 60-foot pole. He said, hey, Wayne, come down here, there's a couple of guys want to talk to you. My pole buddy said, boy, you got the axe first. I said, no, I didn't. So I went down there, climbed down and introduced myself, and they introduced themselves. I had never seen these two guys before in my life.
Right.
It was Sam Wine. He was the division manager from Arlington and Grand Prairie Division, and George Bean was the division engineer over the whole system. And they talked to me a little bit about my education and background and who I was and where I come from, and they knew about what somebody had told them about my work, how I could work. So he said, how would you like to come down to Grand Prairie and settle down with Texas Electric? He said, we lost a serviceman down there, and we want somebody to take over. I said, man, you talking to the right man.
Right.
So they hired me right there in the middle of the road.
On the Burke-Burnett Highway.
On the Burke-Burnett Highway.
Right.
I was hired on the road, and I said, well, when do you want me to go to work? He said, Monday morning, and that was Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock.
You had to get it all together, didn't you?
Yeah, we got it all together right quick. So he told me, I said, well, we'll be there. And we spent the night, the first night we came in, we spent the night with Mr. Wine in Arlington. And they brought me over to Grand Prairie, and I thought, well, we'll have somebody here to kind of show me around and kind of fill me in on all the details of the company and what we had and what I had to do. Well, he'd already moved out and gone. So there it was. They said, here it is, it's yours.
So you had to start over from scratch.
I had to learn everything, the people and everybody else, and I had Arcadia Park, Grand Prairie, and Handling. I took care of it. I was a serviceman for all three little places.
All right, now what was that magic date when you came down to Grand Prairie, Texas? 1936?
1936.
You remember the date?
It was in August, but I don't know what
No,
day.
I believe it was July because Ralph started to school in August, and we hadn't been here for just a little while.
It might have been July.
That is wonderful.
Anyway.
And since 1936, you've been into Grand Prairie like Flynn, right?
Right.
Great. All right, and when you got here, was there anyone else working in the office and in the other area of this business,
Well,
this
there was
Texas Electric?
One lady had a cashier, worked in the little
Do you
office.
remember her name?
Lomo Allen.
All right.
And Margaret Poole,
Oh, she didn't come from.
well, she come later on. Margaret Poole did later. And they had, but Lomo and I would run this business for several years.
All right. You've seen a lot of people come and go to lead this. Can you name some of the other managers so we can name drop a little and put them into our history tape of other people that you remember having worked with since you were the service department? Who was the others who were in charge?
Well, the manager at the time that I was here was George Hooper.
All right.
And then after George, well, Joe Prigmore came here.
All right.
And after George, let's see, who was the manager after Georgia?
No, you said Joe Prigmore after George.
Joe Prigmore. And, but Joe was manager, and after that, I was, I worked here 18 and a half years as serviceman here. Then I was transferred to Arlington.
All right. And what did you do over in Arlington?
I was distribution line foreman. I was in charge of distribution over there, building these lines.
And that was out of the Fort Worth office? Was that the headquarters for Texas Electric?
Arlington was the headquarters.
Arlington
Well,
was the
the
headquarters.
general headquarters was in Fort Worth, yes.
But you generally worked out of the
We
Arlington
worked
area.
out of Arlington.
But you continued to live in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yeah,
You knew all of the folks in Grand Prairie, didn't you?
biggest part of them. I knew
right.
most all of them.
All
When
right.
I first came here, I read all the meters, and we didn't have mailing lists. And I had to deliver all the bills. I read the meters, made out the bills, worked them to the ledgers, and then we delivered them, stuffed them and delivered them.
That
And-
is fantastic. You've just done everything from the ground up on
Well-
seeing that everyone got electricity, that you read the meter, then you billed them for it, and then you had one lady helping to collect,
right.
right?
She did the cashier work in the office, and she was the only one.
All right, now was this a full-time job for you? Did you do any moonlighting, like doing any electrical work on the sides or anything? I know that my dad, Tommy Thompson, knew you very well, and he was an electrician here in the town,
Yeah, I worked
moonlighting.
with your dad.
Moonlighting when he wasn't with the Dallas Power and Light. So.
Well, I didn't have too much time to moonlight. I had three places to take care of, and when they'd have a storm, I maybe going 2 days at a time. Maybe I wouldn't have much sleep during that time. Maybe sleep a couple of 3 hours, and we didn't have too good a distribution system in Grand Prairie or these other towns, and there's always having a lot of trouble. And I was going most of the time during storms and worked out like that. But later on in the years while I was here with Texas Electric, they finally got me some help.
All right, we're going to get back to you in a few minutes and talk with you about maybe any of the organizations in town that you belong to, and especially we want to get back to your church, but we want to get back to Vita just a minute and let her tell a little bit about all of this time that you were working with the Texas Electric. What was she doing? Vita, tell us what you were doing during all these years when your children were growing up, and did you belong to the PTA and some of the things and some of the schools that they attended? Would you look right out into your camera and tell us about that thing?
Well, yes, I belonged to PTA, and I think I was room mother from the time mine started to school until they graduated.
All right, what schools did they start?
Well, they started up there of the
at the 12th grade school, old 11th grade school?
Old 11th grade school.
All right.
And then we moved on the other side of town and went to South Side over there, South Side. And yeah, I belonged to PTA, and like I say, was room mother. And I didn't go to work until my boys were pretty good size, you know, because I never did leave them without supervision. And then I went to work, you know, just part-time.
What doing?
Well, I went to work. I worked for the A&P. I was the first woman checker that A&P ever had.
All right.
And I worked for
And where was the A&P located at that time? Tell us the corner.
It was there where the
Finders Keepers is now?
No.
Jack in the Box.
Jack in the Box.
Where Jack in the Box
Where
is
Jack in the
located
Box
now.
was, it was right there.
Right.
And then Hudson's department store was right there
door.
next to that, and I worked for them.
All right.
And then I worked for Rollins Shoe Store that used to be down by Sister Rose Drug Store when it was way down there. Sister Rose Drug Store, and I worked there. And then I went to work for Watson's, and I worked for Watson's 20-some years. And I retired from Watson's, and I haven't worked since.
All right.
Except at home.
All right, now tell me, of all of these years you were PTAing and working, I know you worked in your church. Did you belong to any clubs, like the Happy Hour Club or anything?
Yeah, belonged to the Happy Hour Club, belonged to the Eastern Star.
All right.
And I guess that's all.
I was worthy matron.
Well, when I was in the Eastern Star, I was worthy matron. But I guess Eastern Star and Happy Hour at that time was all I belonged to.
All right, now, I know that you're both members of the First Baptist Church. And tell us how long you've been working with that church and what all the things that you've done in that, Vita. Would you let us know?
Well, let's see. We went into that church in 36, of course, when we moved here. And
Can you remember the minister's name?
Yeah, Brother Fagan.
Brother Fagan was
Brother
it.
Fagan
Okay.
was the minister.
All right.
And and we were living down there at Miss Kingery's, and that was right across from the old, you know, the old schoolhouse. And he came to see us. And by the way, I hadn't been in Grand Prairie, but 6 days, and I had an acute attack appendicitis. I knew nobody, not one soul, nobody to look after my boys. So Ms. Allen, that worked in the office, she looked after my boys while I was in the hospital. And that was where I was welcome to Grand Prairie.
Well, that was a shock, wasn't it?
Boy, was it ever. And of course, since I've been in the First Baptist Church, I have taught Sunday school. Well, I taught until I went to work, and then I kept on teaching, but when I went to work regularly, I resigned my class. Yeah. But then when I retired, I went back to teaching, and that's what I'm doing now, teaching.
And tell us the class that you're teaching.
I teach 74 74 and 75-year-old ladies.
And of course, they are much, much older than you are, since you are so young.
Oh, heavens, no.
Well, wonderful. I think that's just wonderful that at the beautiful age of a senior citizen that you still continue. So many of us decide that when we get past 65-ish that we're ready to retire and we just don't teach or do anything.
Well, that's right. And we delivered Meals on Wheels for about 6 years.
Yes.
Then Wayne got tired and he quit, but then I just couldn't. So I'm still doing it with helping another girl. And then I worked at Red Cross as a volunteer.
All right.
For several years, 10 I guess, and just never seemed to get through. You know, you always feel like there's somebody that needs you, somebody that just needs just a little helping hand, and that's what I've always tried to do, and thoroughly enjoy it. But the Lord's been good to us. You know, we both have pretty good health, and He's been awfully good to us, and I sure do thank Him for that.
Well, that's a good testimony. Well, let's let you rest a minute and let's get back to Wayne now. Wayne, all of this time we were going to come back and talk with you about maybe some of the organizations that you belong to. Are you a member of the Lodge? I know you're a member of the First Baptist Church. Were you ever a Lions Club or any of the other clubs in town? Tell us about that.
Well, I was certainly I'm a deacon in the First Baptist Church. We've been in that church 52 years.
All right.
In the First Baptist Church. And then I belonged to the Masonic Lodge.
All right.
And I'm also a 32nd degree Mason, and I belong to the both Hela Temple and the Mausla Temple in Fort Worth.
All right.
And the Shriners, and let's see what else.
Do you get to march with them when they march in the parades?
Well, I would if I could see, but you know, I'm just almost blind. I lost my eyesight several years ago, and then also my hearing went out at the same time.
Well, you belong to the Rotary Club, too.
Yes, tell us about Rotary.
I was president of the Rotary Club well, I'm a charter member of the Rotary Club, and I was president from 1951 to 52, and I had the good
Perfect attendance award?
fortune to go to Mexico City to the International Rotary Convention. I was there during the convention. We met with people from all over the world.
How wonderful.
And I sat at the table one day in one of the big hotels there. It is a Reform Hotel. They had a big room there, and there was about 150 people there. There's people from all nations. And I sat right next to a guy from India, and this guy could speak 11 different languages fluently.
Wonderful.
And I told him, I said, well, any man could do that, and I couldn't hardly speak my own English, you know, not very good. But it's just marvelous what those guys did. And the things that we saw and heard in the different countries and how they operated and what their government was, this and that, this was a really interesting thing. And Rotary is all over the world. You know.
Do you still attend the Rotary meetings?
No. When I left Grand Prairie, I had to give up my Rotary to the manager here.
When you went to Arlington?
When I went to Arlington.
Okay.
And, I've been to Rotary several times, but I was a charter member, and we had to shake the bushes when we first started that to get 15 people to get a charter. And we finally got together, and you know, all the people that belong to the Rotary Club, the charter members of this club, as far as I know, there's just 2 of us left, Dewey Miller and myself. The rest of them
Have passed on. Well, that is wonderful. I know that we see Dewey, we work with him in the Old Southland Cemetery Association, and we're getting a new marker for that cemetery, so we get to see Dewey every now and then. Well, Wayne, I know that you've seen a lot of people
I was
coming.
Scoutmaster here too for 21
tell us about
years.
that. Tell us about that. Scoutmaster for 21 years, and what was your troop?
Well, I had Troop 134 in the First Baptist Church, and we haven't had a troop since I resigned. And but I think I raised almost half the kids, little kids in Grand Prairie.
Oh,
They used to
that
be
is
in my troop.
a wonderful service. Do you have any Scout awards that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I didn't get. I probably have enough awards for an Eagle Scout, but I never did go ahead and get it. But I had 5 Eagle Scouts in my troop, 5 Life Scouts, and 5 Stars.
Wonderful.
There was 15 of the boys that went all the way in that, and then some of them, all of them was first class or better.
All right. I wanted to ask you, we have about 3 minutes left, and I'd like for you to name drop some of the people that you think really were movers and shakers back in the time, in the 36s on, when you came to Grand Prairie, that helped really build Grand Prairie, or they were stem winders and leaders. Would you name drop a little for us?
Well, G.H. Turner was one.
All right.
And Perry Nash was one. He's back here. He was west, a lot west of the Trinity, I think.
Yes, and was he the sheriff?
Yeah, he was the chief of police.
Chief of police. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And then L.O. Turner and Minnie Turner, they run the funeral services here, you know.
All right.
And well,
in the Stuffle Beams.
yeah, Mr. Stubblebeam was, he was a good friend of mine. He finally was the president of the First National Bank, you know, and then his
All
2
right.
sons worked in the bank there with him.
Did you ever work with the Chamber of Commerce and Mr. Sargent and some of the
I
others?
worked with the Chamber of Commerce and at times, you know, and during the Rotary years that I was a president of the Rotary Club, you know, each president generally had some project he wanted for himself.
All right.
So what I did was we bought some Guernsey heifers, little calves, you know.
All right.
And we give those to the future farmers.
All right.
And the first one we gave was to Dude Allen's son.
Yes.
And then when that a heifer had a calf, it would come back to the club and we'd
Yes.
give it to someone else.
How wonderful.
And I don't know how many, when I left the club, but they were still delivering
Guernsey calves.
And I hope it's still going.
That is wonderful. We have about 1 more minute. Is there anything, Vita, that you'd like to put on this tape in just about a half a minute to say to the people of Grand Prairie? How do you like Grand Prairie?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I sure do. I can't believe, though, how it's grown, you know, from 36 until now.
Yes.
You just can't believe how anything can grow. From
Unless you've
1,500
seen it.
people, and overnight 10,000 people were sat down, just literally in our laps. And, of course, we didn't have sufficient schools. We didn't have sufficient anything. But I love it. I just wouldn't live anywhere else.
Well, you have something else you want to say.
Well, there's one thing I'd like to say. Back during the times when we were here, and I was only a serviceman here in Grand Prairie, when we'd have a storm, we didn't have any two-way radios and things like they do today to keep in touch with them. So my wife would sit up all night long and take calls and then give them to me. I think she ought to have a
She ought to have a plaque, shouldn't she? She really should. And I want to thank y'all very much for being with us today. Our time's up, and we'll have to have you back later in later years, won't we?
Well, if we're here.
Thank you. Thank y'all for being with us.
Okay.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do. And I want to thank y'all for being with us.
Okay, so, you know,